city was born on the plain of Shinar. A tower began to rise, and an entire people believed that nothing could stop them. They had the same voice, the same plan, and a dangerous desire in their hearts to reach the heavens and make a name for themselves. But when mankind tried to raise its own glory, the Lord came down. In a single moment, the words were lost, the hands stopped, and every face was filled with confusion. The construction was abandoned, and from that place came the different languages that scattered the peoples across the earth. This is the story of the Tower of Babel. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and like this video. By doing so, you help us bring this message to even more people.
After the flood, humanity was given a new chance. The waters had receded, the dry land had appeared once again, and the fields, rivers, mountains, and plains were once more before mankind. The world seemed open, vast, and full of possibilities. But along with that new beginning came a challenge. The earth was immense. The journeys were long. The families were growing. And little by little, humanity had to decide where it would go. God had blessed Noah and his sons. Life was meant to continue, families were meant to multiply, and the earth was meant to be filled. But the human heart does not always choose the path of obedience. At first, everything seemed simple. Noah's descendants grew in number, children were born, families were formed, and new generations walked upon the renewed earth. At that time, everyone spoke the same language. The words were understood by everyone. When someone called out, another person understood. When someone taught, everyone could learn. When someone made a plan, many others could help. Humanity was united by the same voice. And that unity could have been a great blessing. They could have spread out across the places God had prepared. They could have filled the world with families, work, worship, and obedience to the Lord. But as time passed, something began to change. The earth seemed too vast, the paths were unknown, and the great distances seemed frightening to many families. Some looked toward the mountains and thought about the dangers of leaving. Others looked toward the valleys and imagined the risk of being separated. Entire families wondered what would happen if each group went in a different direction. The world was open before them, but within many hearts, the desire to remain together began to grow. And that was how the blessing of unity began to turn into a danger. Then many people set out toward the east. They carried their belongings, their animals, their tools, and their families. They walked across open fields, passed through fertile regions, and continued searching for a place where they could live. After traveling for a long time, they found a great plain in the land of Shinar. That place seemed perfect for them to stop and begin building. The plain was wide, open, and fertile. There was room for houses, pathways, flocks, and buildings. That place seemed to offer exactly what they wanted. A land where everyone could remain together. There the people stopped. First came the tents, then came the small shelters. After that came the working areas and the paths between the families. The sound of the plain began to change. Where there had once been only wind and silence, there were now voices, footsteps, tools, and animals. Men carried materials, women organized the food. Children ran between the tents, and young people learned different trades. The people discovered that they could make bricks. They took clay from the ground, shaped it in molds, and then fired the bricks in the flames until they became strong and durable. They also used bitumen as mortar, a thick substance that bound the bricks firmly together. That discovery changed everything for those people. Now, they could build more quickly, raise larger walls, plan stronger structures, and dream of something that would become more impressive with every passing day. The city grew day after day, and the more it grew, the more the people became amazed by their own abilities. What might once have been gratitude slowly began to mix with pride. The hands that should have served God's purpose began to serve the desire for human greatness. The families looked at their new houses. The workers looked at the walls. The leaders looked at the organized multitude. And within them, an idea grew stronger and stronger. They could build something that would never be forgotten. Then their desire changed. It was no longer enough to live on the plain. It was no longer enough to build a city. It was no longer enough to live in safety. They wanted to make a name for themselves. They wanted to be remembered, admired, and recognized for their own strength. And within the hearts of those people, a great ambition was born. They would build a city, and at the center of it, they would raise a tower so high that it appeared to reach the heavens. The tower would become a sign of their greatness. It would not be merely another building. It would be a symbol of power, fame, and independence. A symbol of a humanity that wanted to remain united, but without walking humbly before God. The plain of Shinar was transformed into one enormous construction site. The kilns burned without stopping. Bricks were stacked, ropes were pulled, scaffolding rose higher, and baskets passed from hand to hand. The entire city began to revolve around the tower. Everyone looked at that great structure as though it were their future. Children stopped to look at it. Workers pushed themselves harder with every passing day. Families took pride in the great construction. The tower could be seen from far away. Those approaching the city first saw its shape rising on the horizon. Those working in the fields watched its height increase day after day. Those walking through the streets felt its shadow falling over the city. The structure continued rising upward, but the hearts of the people sank farther away from humility. They had one language, one strength, one project, and one ambition. At that moment, their unity was no longer only a blessing. It had become a force being used against the purpose of God. The Lord had given humanity an entire earth to fill, but they wanted to bind themselves to one place. With every new height they reached, the people seemed less willing to depend on the Lord. With every day of construction, the city appeared more secure in human eyes. But security without obedience is not true security. And greatness without humility can become a fall. The tower was high, but it was not too high for the eyes of God. The Lord saw the city. He saw the streets, the houses, and the workers. He saw the fired bricks, the bitumen between the layers, and the tower rising at the center of the plain. But God saw more than the construction. God saw their hearts. He saw the pride hidden behind the work, their fear of obeying, and their desire for fame. God saw humanity trying to make a name for itself, a name that did not come from the Lord. In human eyes, the tower appeared magnificent. Before God, it revealed the danger within the human heart. The same language that could have been used for obedience was now being used to strengthen their pride. The same organization that could have spread life throughout the earth was being used to bind everyone to a single project. The same ability to build was becoming an attempt to exalt humanity. Then God decided to act. He did not send another flood. He did not destroy humanity. He did not wash the city away with water. This time, God acted at the very center of that people's strength. Their language. On an ordinary day of work, the sounds of the city began as they always did. Tools struck, Baskets were carried, ropes were pulled, orders were given, and bricks were lifted up the scaffolding. But suddenly, something changed. One worker asked for help, but the other did not understand him. A leader gave an order, but the men around him looked back in confusion. Someone pointed toward the bricks, but another person brought a piece of wood. One group tried to pull a rope, while another released it too soon. The words no longer fit together. The voices were still there, but understanding had disappeared. Where there had once been clarity, confusion arose. Where there had once been a single language, many different languages began to appear. The city, which had once seemed to function like one body, began to divide. What had united those people in their pride began to fall apart. Men repeated their words again and again, trying to be understood. Women called out to family members without receiving a clear response. Workers pointed, gestured, and raised their hands, unable to understand what was happening. The sound of the construction site changed. Before, it had been the sound of an organized multitude. Now, it was the sound of a multitude that was lost. The tower was still there. The scaffolding was still standing. The bricks were still stacked. The tools were still in the hands of the workers. But the construction could no longer continue. Without understanding, there could be no organization. Without organization, there could be no construction. Without the same language, the great human project began to collapse from within. It was not the stones that God confused. It was the words. What God interrupted was not only the construction, it was the pride that supported the entire work. The tower was left unfinished. The kilns grew cold, the ropes were left hanging, the baskets were abandoned on the ground, and the tools rested upon the dust. Workers who had once walked together now searched for those they could understand. Groups began to form. Families who spoke the same language drew closer to one another. Others moved away, unable to explain their thoughts. People who had once worked side by side were now beginning to follow different paths. The city lost its strength. The plain of Shinar, which had been chosen to prevent the people from being scattered, became the place from which the nations began to spread. God's purpose remained. The people tried to remain in one place, but God scattered them across the earth. The tower was left behind. Some departed for distant regions. Others crossed through valleys. Others traveled across mountains. Others walked toward lands they had never known before. They carried their families, their animals, their tools, their memories, and their new languages with them. Humanity spread across the face of the earth. The tower was left behind. Great, silent, unfinished. It did not remain as a sign of victory. It remained as a warning. The people wanted to make a name for themselves, but God showed that no human name is greater than His will. The people wanted to build their way to the heavens, but they discovered that heaven cannot be reached with bricks of pride. The people wanted to prevent themselves from being scattered, but it was from that very place that humanity spread across the earth. That is why the place was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. And from there He scattered mankind across the face of the world. The story of the Tower of Babel is not only about a building, it is about a choice. Humanity had one voice, but did not use that voice to obey. It had strength, but did not use that strength with humility. It had intelligence, but did not use that intelligence to honor the Lord. It had unity, but unity without obedience became collective pride. The Tower of Babel was left unfinished to remind every generation that no human project can remain firm when it rises against the purpose of God. But there is also hope within this story, because God did not abandon humanity. He scattered the peoples, allowed new languages to emerge, and guided families toward new lands. What mankind tried to prevent, God brought about. The earth began to be filled. Families followed new paths. Nations began to arise. And the tower remained in the memory of the peoples as a lesson. True greatness is not found in raising up our own name, but in walking humbly before the Lord. True security is not found in the walls, cities, or towers. It is found in trusting the God who governs history. And the true way to heaven was never built with bricks. It begins with an obedient heart. The Tower of Babel teaches us that unity is precious, but it must be united with the right purpose. Work is a blessing, but it must be guided by humility. Intelligence is a gift, but it must never be transformed into pride. And the most important name is not the name that mankind tries to make for itself. It is the name of the Lord, which endures forever. And so the great tower on the plain of Shinar was left behind. And humanity continued moving forward, not along the path it had planned, but along the path God allowed. Because human plans may come to a halt before an unfinished tower, but the will of God continues to advance across the whole earth.
And that was another part of the great story of the Bible. But there is still so much more to come. Subscribe to the channel and don't miss the next chapter of this amazing story.